The LA Kings, such garish, awkward jerseys until 1988. Well, you can tell what era of the LA Kings were doing the what if in. So Los Angeles got their expansion franchise in 1967 in the Great Expansion with 5 other cities. The Kings were loyal to Los Angeles just got a baseball team the decade before, and they wanted to be a prominent sports town with baseball, basketball, football, and hockey, which they did with the acquisition of hockey. Jack Kent Cooke, who owned the Washington Redskins, actually wanted a hockey team in Los Angeles and would stop at nothing to do so. And he did. He did his job, and the Kings, although they played in the LA Memorial Sports Arena, they had to play. They got their arena, the Great Western Forum, in November 1967. So anyway, the LA Kings were promising. They looked good to be part of the fabric of the West Division, which had all the expansion teams in it. LA even picked up Terry Sawchuk as a goalie after Toronto decided not to give him availability. After all, Toronto only could carry one goaltender, and they decided to keep Johnny Bower. Sawchuk went to Los Angeles. He was moody, but he was okay, and Sawchuk did help LA out. Unfortunately, he floundered in the playoffs, so did the Los Angeles Kings, to be honest with you. So the LA Kings didn't do so well in the playoffs and all that. They had a few decent years. 1975, they were supposed to take things away from the Toronto Maple Leafs, but the Leafs ended up taking care of them. The Kings were involved in 1981 in a famous brawl with the New York Rangers in the playoffs, which the Rangers ended up winning that series. So the Kings basically were not too happy about that. Serves me right. So anyway, LA in 82 changed a few things. We'll get to that later. But anyway, the Kings were not really much of a playoff team. They had a few stars here, there, and everywhere, but they just couldn't do it until 1988 when they got Wayne Gretzky. Mostly because Gretzky's new wife was a Hollywood actress. So basically, they figured they could jump on board and get it. Bruce McNall made Taylor Pocklington a deal he couldn't refuse. LA sent troubled scorer Jimmy Carson the rights to Martin Jelena and a few big first-round picks with $15 million. 3 first-round picks. Of course, going LA's way is Wayne Gretzky and Marty McSorley. So anyway, Gretzky would be a boon to his team. I know he shed a lot of tears in Edmonton, but in Los Angeles he was all smiles. And presented with the new jersey that he liked, that silver and black. Basically, they were copying the Raiders and of course the Ice Cube thing. Black and silver were going to be cool outfits. I know they were kind of like game colors, but you know what? The Kings didn't care. Gretzky would get revenge on his oil drops in 1989 in the first round of the playoffs, even though the Kings were down 3-1 to the Oilers. Gretzky didn't let it bother him. He led the Kings back, and they took care of Edmonton, although Calgary took care of them in the second round. In 1990, the Kings vowed revenge against the Flames in the playoffs, and they did it, including a 12-4 game in which 3 Kings players, I believe it was Taylor, Granato, and Sandstrom, scoring hat tricks. Or was it Granato, Robitaille, and Sandstrom? Anyway, the LA Kings had problems. They took care of the Flames in Game 6 of the first round. Mike Krzyzewski, former Oiler, scoring a floating goal. The Kings ended up losing to the Oilers in the playoffs, something that led them astray. Basically, they couldn't beat Edmonton in the playoffs. Edmonton would prove Gretzky wrong, saying that, we can beat you in the playoffs. 90, 91, 92, the Kings thought they had playoff series wins against the Oilers, but they failed miserably. 93 was different. They didn't have to face the Oilers. First off, they took on the Calgary Flames, which they took aside in 6 games, despite having goaltender issues, Kelly Rudy not performing, Rob Stauber having to come in. And then the Kings took care of the Vancouver Canucks in the last Pacific Division final. And then the Kings took on the Leafs in the conference finals, which was supposed to be a fantastic one, best of 7. When all of a sudden, the Leafs looked great. Up 3-2, the Kings were in deep trouble. Game 6, Wendell Clark put his team on his back and led them to overtime. And then Gretzky gets his high stick up on Gilmore, which was supposed to be a penalty, any type of penalty, not just a 5-minute game, but just a 2-minute penalty. But Frazier refused to move, mostly because he figured that Gretzky's stick was on a follow-through, and it whacked Gilmore in the face, even though Gilmore was bleeding. Worst of all for Leaf fans like myself, Wayne Gretzky scored the overtime winner in Game 6 to force a Game 7. The Leafs looked good. Unfortunately, Wayne Gretzky was better. Gretzky put up a hat trick in a 5-4 Kings win and got the Kings to the Stanley Cup somehow. They would deal with the Montreal Canadiens. And they won Game 1 in Montreal. It was like, wow, Los Angeles is going to pull one out of the hat. But a stick measurement of Marty McSorley was costly. The Canadiens gambled because if they were wrong, they would have had to serve a bench minor. And McSorley's stick was illegal. So the Kings couldn't believe it. The Habs went on to win that game in overtime. Eric Desjardins having a hat trick. That one. Kings would suffer back-to-back terrible losses in overtime in games 3 and 4 on home ice. Even though Mark Hardy made that famous hit on Mike Keane that sent him flying. And the glass was flying too. LA would live to regret it. But in 94, they weren't really that good. They didn't make the playoffs. But Wayne Gretzky was making moves. Gretzky was making moves to be the all-time goal-scoring leader, which he did in March of 1994 against the Canucks. The Kings were rolling right along. Like, they were trying to make the playoffs and all that. They just didn't have the balance. And worst of all, they were ready to lose Wayne Gretzky to free agency. So they basically traded Gretzky to the St. Louis Blues for a return that included Roman Valpat and Charlie Huddy, I think. But anyway, Gretzky's half year with the Blues ended up being a boon and a bust. The bust, basically, is that the Blues could have had Game 7 against the Detroit Red Wings in the second round, but they lost. The Kings wouldn't be quite as competitive as you think they are. However, in 2001, the Kings shocked everyone by taking care of the Red Wings a couple of times in overtime, knocking the Red Wings out of the playoffs in 2001 and putting themselves in against the Colorado Avalanche in the second round. The Kings actually had a 3-2 lead and felt great. Felix Potvin was somehow performing, and to add the fact the Avs didn't have Peter Forsberg because of a lacerated spleen. But Patrick Roy and Colorado led them astray, and the Kings lost Game 6 and 7. Kings would keep trying and trying and trying, but couldn't really find the balance. 2012 was a different year for the Kings, as they found competitive advantages, getting Mike Richards and Jeff Carter for the Flyers because the Flyers gave up on him for off-ice issues. Johnny Quick was becoming a good goalie. Marion Gabbert came in. They had some veteran presence. In 2012, the Kings were an 8 seed, and they shocked everyone by going from 8 seed to Stanley Cup finalists. They couldn't believe themselves. They took on the New Jersey Devils. They beat the Devils in 6 games, especially that Game 6 at home ice. It was amazing. Kings did win the first 2 games in New Jersey, basically polishing them off. The Kings came back to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2014. Well, the Stanley Cup Finals in 2014. Buoyed by a comeback of the ages against the San Jose Sharks. The Sharks were up 3-0 on the Kings, but the Kings came back with 4 straight wins, and the Sharks would live to regret it. The Kings would then take on their other California rivals, the Anaheim Ducks, in the second round, and Anaheim had goalie problems. LA took advantage of that and easily won their series. And then they took on the Chicago Blackhawks, the defending Stanley Cup champs. It went down to a Game 7. And then all of a sudden, double overtime, Alec Martinez, I think it was tipped, but he scored and the Kings were going to the Stanley Cup Finals against the New York Rangers. The problem for the New York Rangers in the 2014 playoffs was that they couldn't keep a 2-0 lead. The Kings took advantage of that in the finals, winning 3 of their 4 games coming back from a 2-0 deficit. That was weird. But anyway, the LA Kings ended up winning the Stanley Cup thanks to Martinez's double overtime winner in Game 5, which shocked everyone on the eastern side of the continent. So anyway, the LA Kings won 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years by being strangely crappy. The Kings haven't really made much of a playoff run since. Now let's talk about the 1982 Los Angeles Kings, because that's my what if. The garish outfits, they still had Marcel Dion, they still had Charlie Simmer and Dave Taylor, they still had the Triple Crown line, but they had a lot of youngsters like Steve Bozek and Daryl Evans among others. The Kings even used Mario Lessard in it, basically losing Rogie Vachon to Detroit, which kind of sucks because Rogie Vachon was basically the goalie of goalies in Los Angeles. But they still have Marcel Dion. So anyway, the Kings took care of things. They somehow squeaked by everybody and won a playoff spot, being the 4th seed against the number 1 Edmonton Oilers, who were just dominant, damn dominant, 1982 dominant. The Kings surprisingly shocked everyone by winning Game 1. And then they won Game 3 by the most epic game of all time. Down 5-0 in the 3rd period, the Kings were like, oh, well, we have to prepare for Game 4. But then magic happened. A lot of fans left. But the Kings pulled 5 straight goals out of the hat, and Edmonton couldn't capitalize on anything. So Edmonton went to overtime with these Kings, and then off of a draw, Daryl Evans blasted the puck over Grant Fuhr's shoulder. Game over. The Kings won 6-5 and took a 2-1 series lead in the rest of 5. Edmonton, though, didn't quit. They won Game 4, which forced a Game 5 back in Edmonton. And you're thinking, it's over. But no, Edmonton lost Game 5 to Los Angeles at home. It's like, what the fuck, man? So anyway, the Los Angeles Kings would take things into their own hands. They took on the Vancouver Canucks for the Pacific Division title. And surprisingly, LA lost to Vancouver. 2 very poor teams going at it. Some of them had to go to the Campbell COnference final against Chicago. But the Canucks did, and they beat Chicago. But, of course, in this what if, we take away Vancouver's championship over the Kings. And LA shocks everyone by beating Vancouver as well, beat 2 Canadian teams. They won't face a Canadian team in the Stanley Cup semifinals, but it's the Chicago Blackhawks, nevertheless. The winner will take on the New York Islanders. Obviously, in one conference, if we do that, we don't touch the other conference unless it's necessary. So, if the Kings falter to the Blackhawks in the Stanley Cup semifinals, the Islanders easily win the Stanley Cup. Otherwise, it'll be Kings Islanders for 1982 supremacy. Well, it's the Kings, it's the Blackhawks. I'm surprised that the 1982 Blackhawks went that far. They were 8 games below 500, and the Kings were 17 games below 500. That's amazing. Like Mario Lessard gets Tony Esposito. I know Murray Bannering was the backup, but Tony Esposito didn't want to lose. It's weird how the 1982 Western playoffs were like anything goes once Edmonton fucked up. The first game saw the Kings win 5-4. Wow. Amazing. Blackhawks have 2-0 lead. Al Secord scored 2 goals. Marcel Dion made it 2-1 for the Kings. Reg Kerr made it 3-1 before Steve Bozak made it 3-2. Tom Lizzie had 4-2 Blackhawks. The Kings ended up scoring 3 quick goals. Jim Fox, after Alex Secord got penalized and ejected for boarding. Then Dave Taylor and Al Hangsleben? Huh? Kings ended up winning the game 5-4. The Kings had Paul Mulvey, Jerry Korab, from Buffalo, Ian Turnbull. Really? That guy? Mark Hardy? Wow. Larry Murphy? Wow, I didn't know. Jim Fox, Bernie Nichols, Charlie Simmer, Stevie Bozek, Marcel Dion, Al Hagwitz-Exeben, Dave Taylor, Jay Wells, Andre St. Laurent, Dean Hopkins, Dan Bonner, not Boner, Mike Murphy, J.P. Kelly, and Robert Palmer. Robert Palmer, wasn't he a singer? And the Blackhawks had Savard, Hutchinson, Fox, Bobby Murray, Secord, Jerome Dupont, Lysiak, Dougie Wilson, Ruskowski, Redker, Brown, Higgins, Mulvey, um, Bully, Daryl Sutter, Steve Larmer, Preston, Crossman, Gardner. 5-4 your score. Taylor, Lassard, and Secord are your 3 stars. I guess Lassard first 51 saves. Daryl Sutter was the one who, well, Daryl Sutter got injured, and Al Secord got ejected. Game 2 sees the Blackhawks come right back. Secord scoring for the Hawks, then Nichols, then Dennis Savard. 2-1. When Dave Taylor made it 2-2 for the Kings, Larry Murphy and Marcel Dion scored, and we thought the Kings were going to take a 2-0 lead ahead at home. However, 3 quick goals by the Hawks, Denny Savard, Tim Higgins, and Doug Wilson did it. Blackhawks had a 4-minute double minor on Terry Ruskowski, but the Kings couldn't take advantage of it. Espo, Savard, Lassard, the 3 stars. Okay. Now on to the Great Western Forum. And Chicago, 12-3. Yikes. Well, the Blackhawks scored 6 goals in the first period. Tim Higgins, Dennis Savard, Al Secord, Dennis Savard, Tom Lysiak, and Dennis Savard with a hat trick. Al Secord made it 7-1 for the Blackhawks. They were on their way. There was a lot of fighting. Tom Lysiak got 17 minutes of penalties for a fight against Andre St. Laurent. Dennis Savard made it 9-3. Al Secord scores a hat trick. Lassard comes back in the net. And then, 11 seconds later, Lassard's back out. Keen's back in the net after Doug Wilson. Doug Crossman scored a goal to make it 12-3. Doug goals on 73 shots. Kings put 74 shots on the Blackhawks. They only got 3 goals. Well, Keynes and Lassard both gave up 6 goals. Lassard had the better save percentage because he faced the most shots. Savard, Secord, Tony. Steve Larmer got injured, which was the weird thing. So yeah, a lot of goals. Marcel Dion put up 2 for the Kings. Dennis Savard put up 4. Al Secord put up 3. So the Kings are in deep trouble. They're down 2-1. And they lose again, 9-5. So the Blackhawks look good, 9-5. Mario Lassard is yanked with a 5-1 game. Greg Fox of the Blackhawks gets in trouble for his anger, all that. Doug Wilson, Tom Lysiak, Dennis Savard, Rich Preston, Dennis Savard. Al Secord and Dennis Savard did it. Dennis Savard with the hat trick. Kings made it 8-5, but it ended up being 9-5. Keynes did much better net than Lassard, so they'll have to put Keynes in. Savard, Secord, Lysiak, 3 stars. Well, out it goes. Dennis Savard 3, Secord 2, Lysiak 2, Wilson and Preston. LA had Jim Fox with 2, Marcel Dion and Bernie Nichols with 2. So Chicago goes home with a great chance to win this series. And they do in overtime, 9-8. So the Kings fuck it up. So once again, the bubble has burst. The others will win the Stanley Cup, thankfully. It was actually 5-3 for the Blackhawks after 1 period. Hutchinson, Dennis Savard, Mulvey, Rich Preston, Doug Wilson all scored for the Blackhawks in the first period. The Kings put up 3 though. Dave Taylor, Marcel Dion. Kings made it 5-4, Bernie Nichols. Tim Higgins made it 6-4 Hawks. Charlie Simmer cut it down 6-5. Larry Murphy on power play made it 6-6. But Dave Taylor got a hat trick to make it 7-6. Kings looked good. Rich Preston scored, tied at 7, and in interval made it 8-7. But the Hawks came roaring back. Bob Murray from Sutter and Wilson. And in overtime in 2.5 minutes, Al Secord from Savard and Hutchinson. So the Kings got crowned. Doug Keynes, that wasn't him. Lassard did much better, but he failed. Wilson, Taylor, Hutchinson, your 3 stars. And that obviously means that the Hawks are here to stay and the Kings were not. I guess it's just as well. I mean, being so many games under 500, the others were never given a chance at all.